Hello, my friends. This is True Crime Tuesday, the series on my channel where I discuss true crime media. Today, I'm going through a book by Ryan Green called The Beast, a chilling true story of a psychopathic child killer, and this is the story of Clifford Olson. So Clifford Olson was, because he's dead, fortunately, was a Canadian serial killer who killed about 14 girls and one boy in a very short period in 1981. And his case is really unique because he was arrested and he struck this really crazy deal where he said that he would tell the police the whereabouts of 10 of the bodies of the victims, and so that would be worth $100,000 to his wife and his unborn child. And then he would have then he would give the 11th victim and the 11th victim's location for free. So obviously this was very, very controversial, and he was convicted and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. But so Canada abolished the death penalty in 1976, but there was a private member's bill to kill him specifically, like not reinstate the death penalty, but just for him. So I'm not sure how that worked, but that wasn't how that would have worked. But that didn't happen. Later on in his so basically he was in prison, and he said, so he had confessed to these 11, and he said, like, there's five more, so you give me more money or my family more money, and then I will, I'll confess to where they are. But at that point, the authorities said, no, we're not going to do that. And I'm not sure how they discovered the other five bodies, but it wasn't with his cooperation. So the wife of this guy, um, basically, they asked her to give the money back, and she's like, no, my husband's a very bad man, but we need the money. And 100,000 Canadian dollars in 1986 would be probably worth about $1 million now. So oh, that's a lot of money back then. And yeah, and later he tried to get paroled multiple times. He died in 2011, but before that, he made like really bizarre claims, like he had been granted clemency from the United States government because he had information about the September 11th terrorist attacks, but he was in a Canadian high security prison when that happened, so how would he know? So completely ridiculous. And he received two pensions. He received an old age pension from the Canadian government, and a pension that would supplement his income. So it basically worked out to be over $1,000 a month. And he doesn't have any expenses because he's in prison. So this was like really, really controversial that he got that money. And um, I don't know how I feel about this particularly, because they wanted to remove pensions from all prisoners. And I think if you have somebody like Olson, who is never going to get out of prison again, and everything is dependent on, like, all of his expenses are provided for by the government, he doesn't need this pension, right? And because of the deal he struck when he was arrested, his family shouldn't need his pension either. But if we look at like more normal circumstances, like you can be in prison for like 15 years. So why shouldn't you have a pension if you worked before that, right? Like I I understand that we want to punish people, but it, imagine you commit a crime in your 20s and you work all of your life doing things that are not related to that crime. You're arrested. Let's say you're arrested when you're uh, like 65, right? You're arrested when you're 65. The sentence is 10 years. So you're out when you're 75. And you don't get this pension. You don't have anything. So that just puts more drain on the system, right? Because then you have to apply for other forms of support. So I don't really, I don't really get that idea. I think it's more complicated than people think. Um, yeah, but like obviously Olson's story, the pension part is like a footnote to Olson's story. Like he was a brutal, sadistic murderer who died in prison as brutal, sadistic murderers should do. What did I think about this book? I'm not sure it's Green's fault or whatever, but I was listening to the audiobook and there are like there's sections that don't make sense chronologically because he starts talking about Olson's wedding about three different times and he wasn't married for very long. He got arrested shortly thereafter, and this is seen as some sort of motivation for him. And he talks about it like twice, and nearly in the same wording, but a little bit different. So that's why I think it might not have been a problem with Green's writing, but more a problem with the editing. But there's one thing, like, I have to say, and it might be a bit of a small thing to criticize, but I am Canadian. I grew up in Canada. And in fact, when Olson was committing his crimes, I would have been 4 years old. And when he was arrested, I would have been like 9 years old when he was arrested. We did not call movies pictures, right? We called them movies. Like he says like these 13-year-old girls who would have been like a couple of years older than me were going like, "Oh, now I'll have some money to go to the pictures." Like no, like Green is British and I know like in earlier books of his that I've read, he's been talking about like Americans referring to lorries and stuff, and it's not necessarily his fault, but you need some kind of like localization if you're talking about like a country that you don't know anything about. And it's not the first time he's mentioned Canada. And, you know, like, it's such a small thing, but ugh, it was really irritating. Like, it kind of like makes it paints us as living in like 1950s, and I had a like really hard time because I was listening to the narration and they're discussing Clifford Olson and what he looked like, and I imagined that this was in like 1920 and he was like some. It's like, hey kiddo, you want a job? And it's like, no, this is when I was growing up. Like people didn't talk like that. They did not. Oh, it's so frustrating. So I think like his Green's more recent books have been more and more disappointing for me. I think that the story of Olson is like his murders is not that interesting. Actually, he's just a pathetic man, and the execution of the writing of this book is not great. So if I was going to give it a rating, I'd give it like 4 out of 10. I think that Green does have some really good true crime books that you can read. Some are very, very chilling. This one is just poorly edited and the story is not very interesting to begin with. But what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Put your thoughts in the comment section. If you like what I do, please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 150 subscribers by the end of January. And if you really like what I do, check out the Patreon in the show notes or the description. Bye-bye.